Dear viewers, welcome to yet another edition of Expert Speaks. What is the topic that I have brought today? I do not have a structured topic for you. Today, I'll be talking to the ACE Fund Manager, Miss Harini for practical insights on how to do the investing. Investing is just not about being bookish, it's just not about the P ratios or the price to book ratios and what is being taught in the classroom. There is more to it than what it meets the eye. The fund managers, the successful ones, develop this character over a period of time. Today, I'm going to talk to Harini about the observations she has made, how we can correlate to the investing of today's times. This is NRI Money Clinic for you, and I am Dr. Chandrakant, but your financial guide for a happy living.
NRI Money Clinic. No hype, just the right advice.
Dear viewers, expert of the week, Harini fund manager, is not somebody who is new to you. She comes on the channel at regular intervals of time. She has a fan following. People keep asking for her views on what's happening in the market, and her videos have gone viral many number of times. Today, I'm going to get into a chat with her, try to extract what she has learned over a period of years as a fund manager and as a research analyst. She has a very good ability to look beyond what meets the eye, and that makes her a very, very professional fund manager. For those of you who are not known who is Harini or who are tuning into for the first time on this channel, Harini is a fund manager working with Tamohara Wealth Management Boutique firm in Mumbai. She started her career in New York with a hedge fund, and when she came back to India a few years before, she started with Ghalla Bansali Stockbrokers. She was managing the truffle investments. The funds managed by her, the PMS schemes managed by her, has drawn the attention of Crisil and PMS Bazaar, which have given 4-star rating for the funds managed by her. Welcome to this show, Harini Dedia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhatt, for inviting me over. And I'm actually very, very excited to be here today because it is going to be more of distilling what I've learned and sharing it with you in a conversation. And let's see where it takes us.
Right. So we keep chit-chatting at regular intervals of time, and once in a while you make a statement that makes me think many times. So I don't have a format for you today. Let's discuss what has happened in the Indian marketplace over decades, and are there any learnings from this for guiding the investors in the future? See, I have been in this line for quite some time. I have come into this line somewhere in the early 90s, just prior to Harshad Mehta period, and I observed this stock market from a very close quarters. The 80s of India saw the IT revolution starting up. And in the 90s, the new reforms came in. At the same time, the IT revolution was gaining steam, and India saw the emergence of many IT companies, which have grown to become very mature companies and companies of global standards today. We have Infosys, we have TCS, we have HCL, and it's a sad story that Satyam went down in between. During the dot-com bust, many of these companies perished. That's because of mushrooming of these companies. More than the love for the subject, probably the greed in the individual, which made mushrooming of these companies. I'm very sure that these companies which came and gone and this came and matured have left behind a lot of points for us to discuss, which can guide the second way of startup culture, which is shaping up in India right now. The 80s and 90s saw the IT revolution and specific startups coming in that line. Not the brick and mortar kind of a thing. But today we have another way of startups which are taking over. Anything which can be digitized today is coming into this fintech sector. So we do not know how the future is going to unfold here itself. Now, being a fund manager, you have seen all these companies from close quarters, the management, the promoters, professionalism, the acumen the promoters have brought into this field. Are there any learnings that you can share with our audiences, the practical insights which are not there in the books, which can guide them in the future?
Absolutely. And, before I get into what we've sort of learned from these companies, both the ones that have endured and done very well and the ones that have gone through a downturn or, gone bust, I'll just, give a fair sort of disclosure that I'm not trying to make a judgment on any of these companies per se. What I'm trying to do is see, investment is a game of probabilities, right? We don't know the future for certain, because if we did, we would all be trillionaires by now. But it is a game of probability, and we always try to find for ourselves heuristics that we can depend on to help us gauge these probabilities better, right? Where am I most probable to go right, right? So whenever we look at industries just beyond the numbers, right, beyond price to earnings, beyond price to book, beyond your everything that is published out there in objective data, we try to understand what are the other bigger ingredients that make somebody a success, make somebody an enduring company, make somebody that story that is around for multiple decades versus not. And one thing that we've come up with that we sort of rely on is that when we are in a technology business, be it software, be it hardware, be it biotech, whatever it is, anything that is heavy technology that is rapidly evolving, we find comfort in actually betting on promoters rather than professionals. So we find businesses that are run by promoters, or at least governed by a promoter, far more resilient than businesses that are actually run by professionals that have come from some consulting firm, or you're seeing sideways migration by a lot of top level people, right, who leave one firm, join another as CXO, then 5 years later they move on somewhere else. So companies that are run by such professionals, we've seen the success rate to be far lower. And that has been our sort of biggest learning beyond the books, beyond the numbers out there when we're looking at technology businesses. So that is the big thought that we have on this space.
When you talk about promoters and the professionals, especially with respect to IT, two things stand out. Promoters are not somebody who is run of the mill. See, they have either inherited from their parents, or they have taken a lot of time to mature in their business. Probably these could be the persons who are in the 50s or 60s, or maybe older, second generation. Something has come into that. But IT, the startup kind of a thing, is the domain of youngsters. You're youngsters, you have an idea, the latest thing which is happening around. How do these two things combine? There are two ways I can look at it. One, a youngster who has an idea also has a promoter kind of an abilities to run the show, very unlikely. Or there could be a promoter who is a very savvy businessman, but if he has the ideas given by a professional, can groom it into a business. Which one do you think is a better combination around that? See, we have seen several cases. See, in case of Infosys also, we saw the first four promoters building it. They were the first generation persons, very young guys, very dynamic, something new. They didn't have money. They built it from scratch and took it to a completely world-class company. But the events which followed after that is something where you are coming into, professional leave, what happens, we do not know. So what do you have to say on this, or what's your observations around this?
So, I would say let's even step back and look at it at a global scale, right? The largest tech companies that have endured, that you and I use on a very regular basis, right? Apple, Google, Amazon. Arguably, when all these companies started, they were started by very young, dynamic, slightly eccentric personalities, but very promoter driven, right? So Jeff Bezos is famous for very openly writing in his initial letters to shareholders that, hey, I'm not going to make any profits for you, right? My job is to keep on reinvesting and build a company of scale and build it as a dominant power in the retail arena. And then he obviously added more and more business to that. But his idea was very clear that I'm going to continuously reinvest in my business. And when we look at Steve Jobs also trying to build Apple out, there was a brief period of time for which Steve Jobs was let go of from the Apple. The board actually told him to leave the company, and the company at that point of time was not a dominant force in tech the way it is today, right? Yeah. The company needed to achieve that certain level of stability and credibility before the promoters could then step back and say, okay, we can just govern the board now, and now the professionals can take over because we've done our bit and we've gotten it to this level. So even when we see Infosys today, Infosys board till date is governed by Mr. Nilekani, who's one of the founders of the company, right? So until very recently, the founders were very involved in the daily operations. And even today, when there is a professional CEO, the board is actually governed by the promoters. So I'm not saying that, actual running of the company should always stay with the promoters. I think it is very good when, promoters realize that they might have a certain ceiling to their abilities, or a certain new generation of CXOs might bring certain fresh ideas and they might be too stuck in their silos. I think it's actually a positive sign. But I've seen that there has to be at least some governance that is, done by the promoter, so to speak, right? So the way I would answer your question is younger stage companies, right? Till they become a dominant force in their respective niches that they've selected, it is better to be promoter driven. And later on, you can be professionally run, but still promoter governed. So that is how we distinguish today. So I think if I look at a tech company that is very young, be it in pharmaceuticals or be it in engineering or whatever it is, I would prefer a younger promoter personality to be there. And then I would prefer that perhaps once it reaches a certain maturity size, like Infosys and TCS are clear winners in the IT software space today, then it is okay to be governed by the same family or the same promoter, but driven by a professional. That is still acceptable. But I think the promoter involvement has to be there in these companies. And my reasoning is very, very simple, right? I think technology by definition is ever changing, ever evolving, right? We humans don't stay stagnant. We don't get stuck in one place. We constantly push the proverbial wheel forward all the time. And in doing so, it requires companies to take very bold calls. It requires companies to reinvest in the business, reinvest in developing new things, reinvest in R&D. And when you get professionals too young in the game, when the ethos of the company is not completely developed, when the dominance of the company is not developed, and the promoters don't govern such companies, we've seen that professionals tend to give in into the short-term goals, right? Stock price management. I mean, the unfortunate thing of us investors is we always have these quarterly results come out and we demand quarterly performance. And it's very easy for a professional CEO to get stuck in that loop with us, right? Where they're only trying to maximize shareholder return in the short run and not really taking the generational call, because honestly, they themselves haven't taken the generational call on the company, right? They're probably thinking, hey, this is a good career move for the next 3 to 5 years, and then I'll shift and look at something else. And we find that there is a principal agent issue over there. So, young company, promoter driven, promoter run. Once you're dominant enough, promoters can take a backseat and govern it, but they should still guide the principles of the company. That's how we look at technology businesses.
What I feel is it looks like a family. See, there is a child in the family, mother is there, father is there. Everybody has a role to play there.
Right.
Progress happens because of the child, which is an idea, technology, which means you need that younger one. You need a mother because the child requires that care, assurance. It can come and confess with a mother. But equally true is the care of the father. Father is not as careful or as, how do you say, he's not like mother. But his commitment to family or the care he takes is similar to that of a promoter, Okay, yes, it is fine to do that, but don't exceed your limit wherein which it questions the existence of the family itself, or it can become a problem which nobody can control tomorrow. That could be the role of the promoters. And if a child grooms up and proves itself to be a successful person, probably the parents can step back and give the child a better or more role to run the company. Probably that could be the evolutionary phase, I feel, in a company which is required. So either you should have promoters who can guide you correctly on the board, or it should be the promoters who are putting the money, but they overlook the working of the professionals. Even, for example, even venture capital firms that way. When an idea catches up and when people put in money through a venture capitalist, obviously the board members from the venture capitalist will keep an eye on how the promoters take care of their business. Is there a siphoning? Is there wrong intention, or is it something which is not working well? Yes, the energies of the entrepreneurs is there, but at the same time, the guidance from the promoters probably makes it work far better. Is my observation is what you shared? Is that my understanding correct there?
So you're absolutely right on the parents' part, right? Like parents define the value system of the child. As long as the child is choosing their own path, but sticking to that core belief and value system, it's okay. Let the child, take their own path. When they deviate from that core value system, parents really need to step in and be like, this is not what we've taught you, and we would really recommend you look at this or that, whatever it is. Where I have a slight disagreement, if I may say so, with your point on venture capitalists, or just let's take a broader term, like all investors, right? Where investors get on the board and supervise. See, we investors, we're very fickle-minded as a breed, right? We do, because we have the option to exit. Are we emotionally invested in the company? Most likely, most investors are not, right? So venture capital funds also will have a 5 to 7 year view on any company, right? Because that is the duration of their fund. They have to make their money in 7 years and show returns to their investors and then leave and do something else. So they almost, I think, enter with a mentality that, let's prep this up for an exit, 5 to 7 years, right? So when you enter, it's like entering into a marriage with a divorce date set. I mean, it just doesn't make sense, right? So that's what that's where we have an issue with firms that just get solely driven by venture capital oversight, because we feel that their time frame is such that they will be encouraged to take decisions for that 5 year outlook, right? They want to time and get a perfect exit. So we don't like this build, operate, transfer or exit kind of models that works very well in Indian roads, not in technology companies. We like businesses that endure, right? That those who can reinvest and create a lot of shareholder value. And I'll tell you where this idea really came up to me. I was listening to a podcast on Dolby, right? Dolby Digital. I was stunned when I started hearing the podcast. I realized I actually don't know any competitor's name. To me, as to most customers and consumers of electronics, of movies alike, good sound means Dolby, right? In fact, that is how a lot of consumer electronic brands out there advertise that their TV is good or their speaker is good because it's Dolby Digital enabled, right? And it is a 4 decade business that's been run by a family. And look at the dominance they've had in that niche of sound engineering, that till date we don't know of another company in sound. I mean, most lay people, I doubt, would know, including myself, would know any company that does anything in sound engineering that is rated as top class. So today, a Sony TV out there is actually marketed with that Dolby Digital sticker, right? And that is how Sony is trying to say that, okay, we have the best system because we use Dolby Digital sound technology. So that is what we, mean that if at all it at some point of time, was governed by just professionals. I'm not saying run, but I'm saying even governed by professionals, it is very easy that they would, listen to us investors and be like, okay, we'll increase the dividends, we'll give you share buybacks, and we'll do all this, and we'll stop reinvesting in, because we are already the kings. What do we need to do to reinvest, right? So they can very quickly slip into that mentality. But because it is promoter governed till date, they've taken that generational call of, always being ahead of the curve and always reinvesting in sound technology so that they always are that point of prestige in that game. And that is the only point I sort of have a slight disagreement on, that investors
No,
and venture capitalists are not the best people to govern boards.
I understood this particular point. See, when a venture capitalist comes, he comes with a time frame. He is in a hurry. He wants to make it happen. He wants to create money out of it, and he leaves.
Right.
Whereas a promoter or a paternal, as a fatherly figure, what we spoke of, has immense time at his disposal. He can give the time that it requires.
Right.
He makes sure that it just doesn't become a wrong financial misadventure around that. So he knows the exposure limit, or if he has to hire somebody else, that's the care it will come. A VC, on the other hand, is that time-bound kind of an action. You came to the topic of this Dolby sound system. When you were telling, I was just visualizing from my times what all things have happened. Probably you will recollect this. Maybe your mother recollects this. There was a brand called Dalda in India, which is a synonym for Vanaspati. So people forgot the name Vanaspati. So if it is Dalda, it is Vanaspati. So nobody remembered Dalda. Likewise, Godrej today is in different places, but Godrej initially was remembered for the Almiras. So even in the village side, you say, I want to buy a Godrej without knowing it's a company. You have similar examples in many. I am a veterinary doctor by profession. So during my earlier years when I was working professionally, there was by this Hindustan Liver and a few companies which are promoted cattle feed brands. So people forgot that it is cattle feed. People started telling it is OK. OK is the brand name. So said, OK, give me OK, which actually meant was nothing but that particular product. So a brand grooming, making it recall, giving it the time for it to remain there, is everything is the job of a promoter. So promoters do not work with a specific timelines in limit, but they make sure that things fall in place.
Right.
Probably, yeah. See, you run this Q PMS, Harini, and I remember we were discussing various points which go into this. Like you said, quality of management, which is a very diffuse word, difficult to describe. Will these thoughts also go into it when you pick up the stocks?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, investing is a game of probabilities, right? And when you're especially even devising a quantitative model, it is not to say that this is the only way to optimize returns, right? This is the way I understand that the way my time horizon and my risk reward mentality is, that my chances of getting it right if I do XYZ checks is far better, is how I'll actually go and construct a quantitative model based on it, right? So there are some people out there who run algo funds beautifully on momentum factors, right? Because it works for them. So we can't say that, we are better than them or they are better than us or anything like that. Within our time frame and risk reward profile of investing, let's increase our probability of getting things right? Because nobody has seen the future. So we can do is, try and improve our strike rate constantly, right? Like let's get from a strike rate of perhaps a Rishabh Pant to, let's get to a strike rate of, let's say, a Sachin or a Gavaskar or something like that. Let's make that journey, right? So we always try and improve our probability of getting things right. This is one of the things that factors into that we believe in India in companies, because our philosophy is that we want to find reinvestment compounders. What I mean by that, really fancy jargony term is we want to find companies that can, from their own cash profits, plow it back into business and keep on showing that growth year on year, right? For us, we feel that that is best done by companies that are, promoter governed, if not promoter run completely. And that factors into our understanding of businesses and our stock selection as well.
Harini, one question that comes to my mind is, this is a zamana of do-it-yourself investors, right?
Right.
How does a do-it-yourself investor arrive at a decision? He looks at the fund performance in the past. He takes a call around that. His friends say this is a good one, or he thinks cloud computing is a good business. So either the quantitative metrics or psychological inputs are used while making the decision for investing in something or not. My question that, or the doubt that is there in my mind is, while we cannot forget the quantitative aspect of investing, how cheaper a stock is, what is the growth prospect, is it an established concept which might have a bright future? Other than that, is qualitative metrics like what you said now, let's look evaluating a management. So on one side there are only professionals, and another side there are promoters. Is this something which one has to really look into, or will there be real chance that success ratios are far better if the qualitative metrics are put in decision making process?
I think it is almost an essential requirement today to develop these qualitative factors as well, right? And the reason I say that is there are so many funds, right? I was just reading an article that told me that there are more hedge funds in the US than there are Dunkin' Donuts, right? So there are so many funds out there, and quantitative metrics are very easy to track, right? I can just set up a system and run a scoring based on that and all of that. So how is then anybody going to come out with a different output? Like everybody is going to come out with similar results. And if we all know that if everybody is doing the same thing, then the profits in that thing will keep on diminishing. The returns in that thing will keep on diminishing. So you have to, almost develop these heuristics, these probabilistic scenarios in your head, which work very well with your risk reward, that help you gauge the qualitative factors very, very well. And the second point is a lot of companies in India are still very young, right? 500,000 crores in Indian context is a very significant thing. But if you see in a global context, $100 million turnover, is not very, very significant. I mean, I think there are 90,000 companies odd in the US that have a turnover of more than $100 million. So in the global context, it doesn't mean much to, go beyond that. When you look at all these young Indian companies that are at that range of, 500,000 crores, you can't only go by their numbers, right? Because, like I said, it takes a character to get you from 0 to 1. Whether that character can get you from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100 is something that you have to judge for yourself, right? You can come up with a lot of other scenarios, right? It takes a certain kind of personality to control costs and a certain different kind of personality to show growth. So there are all these various things that go on in trying to understand the management of a company, their policies, how they create a work culture and all of that. And very honestly, I mean, apart from the fact that if everybody is looking at only quantitative numbers, because it's easy to get, easy to digest and, run in your Excel and all of that, we'll all get the same outcome. Apart from what I mentioned, that if everybody is chasing the same quantitative factors, which are very easy to digest, plot and monitor, then everybody will have same outcome, which means the profit for everybody will go down. I think, what is very important to note that in India, you can make a growth case for anything under the sun, right? Because on a per capita basis, you compare us to US, you compare us to China, Brazil, whatever it is, you will see that, there is a growth scenario to be made for everything and anything. So I can tell you, and I can make my Excel talk, all pretty numbers and tell you, hey, 15% growth for this company until perpetuity is possible. Because, India consumes X amount of toothpaste per person and, Brazil consumes 20X. And so we have to get there at some point of time. But is this the person who's going to be able to execute or not? That is a call that is there in some numbers, yes, but it's completely not there in the numbers. That is a feel for the promoter that you have to develop with time. And there is perhaps no substitution for it. You can always read, listen to podcasts. So I, got this sort of eureka moment when I heard the Dolby podcast. It might happen to others as well, but it's only when you hear that or you read that and you then see it in action and in practice is when your conviction starts developing. Okay, this is a theory that I want to build out. This is something that I think I need to incorporate in my process. And I need to understand people more and more from this framework. And that will help me gauge the companies better. So I think you can almost not do away with the qualitative aspect anymore.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. See, look at an example from cricket today. See, Tendulkar may go out of form for a while, but Tendulkar remains a Tendulkar. Virat Kohli, how long, it defied not having century. But you have to have faith on them. They have got that particular character. They have got the technique. It's just the time that something went wrong. It can happen with a good company. It can happen with a good PMS scheme. It can happen with a good fund. It's perfectly possible. I have seen in one of the AMCs, the fund manager, most of the time the fund will lag behind, but suddenly he comes from behind and beats everyone. So it has to do with the qualitative aspect of that particular fund manager. For reasons I'll not take out the name here. It's not fair on my part to do that. But if you're in an advising business, this is what the fund manager has been doing. These are his thoughts and this might work out and this happened multiple number of times. It cannot be proven on a quantitative model, but you can have a conviction. When a business goes to a bank, the bank managers also look who is the promoter. What's the track record? if the integrity of the promoters are well established and they have proven themselves over multiple cycles. The banks may be considerate to take care of their outstandings or extend their lines of credit, which will help a company to survive. But the bank may not be sparing for a new entrepreneur. They may not. They may say, no, it's not possible. Let's wind up, or let me call back my funds. That might happen. So the promoters, which is basically a qualitative aspect, which becomes very, very important. During our conversation, you made one point about the ethical side or doing the business the right way. Again, see, if the professional or promoters, if that character is not visible, at any point of time, it can become a risk not only for the monies an individual investor has invested, it can become a risk for the regulators, it can become a risk for the large number of employees, suppliers, debtors, banking industry. A case in point is Satyam Computers.
Right.
Nobody knew this, See, such a fraud was brewing around. It happened with Enrons, the company called Enron. There are quite such examples across the thing. So these are all will come with quality. You can't measure it with a Excel sheet or some figures over there. You have to make your own judgment. Either the proximity to a promoters or how they conduct, or the other metrics have to be found out. Harini, that's a wonderful discussion we had. Quantitative versus qualitative, professional versus promoters. All in all, it is fair to say investing, no one can say at any point of time that you have mastered it. There are things which you need to keep learning. There are things which you have to refer to the annual reports, the reports in the press, or whatever it is. More than anything, there is a human factor which gets involved, which answers to the question of ethics, abilities, a character to withstand the vagaries of the business, and to come back from all the odds and create a succeeding position. Thanks for bringing to the benefit of our audience these thoughts. And thank you very much for your time. I look forward to interacting with you in one another episode on more insights in the practical side of investing. Thank you very much for sparing your time for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhajan. This was definitely a very engaging discussion, and you also gave me a couple of more points to think about. So we should definitely circle back and follow up on this conversation as well. Thank you.
Dear viewers, hope you enjoyed the conversation I had with Harini Dedia about the practical side of investing, which goes beyond the books. If it did help you and it interested you, give me a thumbs up. Please do not forget to share these videos with your friends and relatives. If you are a person who is watching my channel for the first time, do not forget to subscribe for this channel and hit the subscribe button now. Thank you very much for watching this episode on NRI Money Clinic. I shall be back with you with yet another topic, with yet another expert next Tuesday. Till then, stay safe.
Press the bell icon for more details and subscribe our channel.